The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence hit like a punch in the gut. The house was empty, but it wasn't supposed to be. Sarah had promised she'd be home early to put the kids to bed, but there was no sign of her or them. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I could smell her perfume in the air, that sickly sweet scent that she never used before. Something was off. The kids should have been running around, toys strewn everywhere, but the living room was untouched, like no one had been here all night. My phone buzzed. It was a message from our neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Just wanted to let you know, the kids are with me. Sarah said you had an emergency at work. An emergency? I hadn't been called in for anything. My stomach twisted as I stared at the message. Without thinking, I went upstairs, each step echoing in the silence. I pushed open the bedroom door, and there it was. Sarah's new dress, crumpled on the floor, still smelling of smoke and some stranger's cologne. My hands clenched into fists as the reality of it hit me. I didn't waste time. I grabbed the dress and threw it into the trash. If she thought she could waltz in here after whatever the hell she was doing, she was dead wrong. The kids weren't home, and I wasn't waiting around like some fool. I went to the closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and started packing up her things. If she wanted to act like this wasn't her home, I'd make sure she knew she wasn't welcome here. And then I heard it, her car pulling into the driveway. I didn't stop, just kept shoving her clothes into the bag, my heart pounding with every movement. The front door creaked open downstairs, followed by the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Babe?" she called out, her voice light, oblivious. I paused, the bag half-packed. The moment of truth was here, and she had no idea what was waiting for her. The door to the bedroom swung open, and there she was, standing in the doorway, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. The packed bag, the empty house, and the fury in my eyes. "Where are the kids?" she asked, her voice wavering. I didn't answer, just watched her as realization slowly dawned. She was about to find out that tonight wasn't just another one of her little secrets. It was the night everything unraveled. Sarah's smile vanished completely as she stared at the half-packed bag on the bed, her eyes darting between me and the pile of clothes spilling out of the closet. Her fingers twitched nervously, and she took a small step backward, almost as if she was trying to retreat from the confrontation that was crashing down on her. "Where are the kids, Matt?" she repeated, her voice shakier this time. I stepped closer, closing the gap between us. "They're safe, Sarah. I made sure of that." I could see the confusion and fear starting to cloud her eyes. Good, I thought. She should be scared. "Why are you packing my things?" Her voice was sharper now, like she was trying to regain control of the situation. But control was the last thing she had. "I think you know why," I said, my voice cold, almost foreign to my own ears. I reached into my pocket and pulled out her phone, the one she had conveniently left behind in her rush to get ready tonight. I'd seen the messages, the ones from him, and they weren't the kind you could explain away as just friendly banter. Her face went pale when she saw the phone in my hand. She didn't even try to deny it, which told me everything I needed to know. "Matt, it's not what you think," she started, her words trailing off as she realized how pathetic they sounded. "Oh, really? Because what I think is that you've been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long. You thought you were so clever, didn't you? Slipping away for work meetings, pretending to be out with friends. But you're not as clever as you think, Sarah." Her eyes flashed with something, anger, guilt, maybe even a hint of regret. But she still tried to salvage the situation. "It was a mistake, okay? It was just once." I cut her off, my voice rising. Once? Don't insult me. I've seen the messages. I know about the nights you didn't come home until late, the times you lied about where you were. How long has this been going on, Sarah? How long have you been making a fool out of me? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. Not this time. I'd seen the look of happiness on her face when she came home tonight, like she was on some kind of high after being with him. That wasn't the face of someone who made a mistake. That was the face of someone who didn't care about the consequences. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered, but the words were empty, hollow. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You didn't want to hurt me? You've done nothing but hurt me, Sarah. And tonight it ends. I want you out of this house. I want you gone before the kids come back in the morning. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to actually go through with it. But she should have known better. I wasn't going to let her destroy our lives without a fight. I'll give you till sunrise. Pack your things and leave. You can stay with him for all I care. But don't you dare show your face here again. She opened her mouth to protest, but I was done listening. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there in the ruins of what she had done. This was just the beginning. I stormed down the stairs, each step heavier than the last, as if the weight of everything I had just uncovered was finally bearing down on me. The anger in my chest burned hotter with every second that passed. I needed to get out of that house before I did something I'd regret. But I wasn't done with her yet. Not by a long shot. I grabbed my keys from the counter, the metal clinking sharply against the marble, and made for the front door. But just as I reached it, I heard Sarah's voice from behind me, frantic and pleading. Matt, wait. Please, can we just talk about this? You don't understand. I spun around, glaring at her as she stumbled down the stairs, her face a mess of tears and desperation. What's there to talk about, Sarah? You cheated, you lied, and now you're paying the price. I don't need to understand anything more than that. She hesitated at the bottom step, clutching the banister like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. But it's not just about that. We've been drifting apart for months. Matt, you've been so distant, so wrapped up in work and the kids. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I snapped, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. You could have talked to me. We could have fixed things together. But instead, you ran off to him. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. She shot back, the desperation in her voice giving way to something darker, more accusing. You made me feel like a ghost in this house, Matt. Like I didn't even exist to you anymore. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the anger from boiling over, but it was impossible. So, your solution was to sneak around and betray everything we built? That's what you thought would make things better. Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or just a fleeting moment of clarity. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, defensive stare. I needed to feel something again, to feel wanted, alive. And you, she paused, swallowing hard. You stopped caring a long time ago. For a moment, the words hung between us, heavy and charged. There was some truth in what she said, but it didn't excuse anything. I had been working harder, maybe distracted by the demands of our life, but that didn't justify what she had done. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet seething with rage. You think you're the victim here? You think this excuses the lies, the sneaking around? I gave you everything, Sarah. Everything. And you threw it away like it was nothing. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. For a second, I almost thought she was going to apologize, to finally own up to what she had done. But instead, she said the one thing that pushed me over the edge. If you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened. My mind went blank. That was it, the last straw. All the pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights. It all exploded in that moment. "Get out," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Get out of my house before I do something I regret." She froze, staring at me as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. But I wasn't playing games anymore. I was done. "Matt, please, get out," I roared, the force of my voice sending her stumbling back. She looked terrified, and maybe a small part of me took some satisfaction in that. But mostly I just wanted her gone. She didn't say anything else. She just turned and fled up the stairs, disappearing into the bedroom. I heard the door slam shut, followed by the muffled sound of her sobbing. But I couldn't bring myself to care. I stood there in the middle of the hallway, my whole body trembling with rage, my hands clenched so tightly around the keys that they dug into my palm. I could still hear the echo of her words in my head, like poison spreading through my veins. If you'd been a better husband, maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't been the perfect partner. But I sure as hell didn't deserve this. I needed to clear my head, to get away from the toxic energy that was suffocating me in that house. So I walked out the door, slamming it behind me, and headed for my car. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than there. I drove around for what felt like hours, the anger still simmering inside me, refusing to die down. My mind raced with everything that had happened, every word she had said, every lie she had told. The memory of her standing there, trying to pin the blame on me, replayed over and over until I thought I might lose my mind. But then, something shifted. The anger started to transform into something colder, sharper. I wasn't just going to let her get away with this. She needed to understand exactly what she had done, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. I pulled over into an empty parking lot, the streetlights casting long shadows across the asphalt. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. The kids were safe at Mrs. Jenkins' place, and Sarah had no idea what I was planning. She thought she could keep living this double life, that she could play me for a fool. But she was wrong. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. My old friend, Tim. We hadn't talked in a while, but I knew he'd still have my back. Tim was the kind of guy who could find out anything about anyone. He had connections, knew people who could dig up dirt, uncover secrets. Everything that Sarah thought she had buried deep. The phone rang twice before Tim picked up. "Matt? Long time, man. What's up?" "Tim," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I need a favor." There was a brief pause on the other end. "What kind of favor?" "The kind where I need to know everything about a certain someone. Where she's been, who she's been with, and anything else you can dig up." Tim didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. "Give me the details," he said. I rattled off Sarah's information, where she worked, the places she claimed to be, the time frames. I knew Tim would take it from there, and within days, I'd have everything I needed. Sarah thought she could hide, but she was about to learn how wrong she was. "Consider it done," Tim said after I finished. "I'll get back to you as soon as I have something." I thanked him and hung up, my heart still pounding, but for a different reason now. The plan was in motion, and I wasn't stopping until I had the truth laid bare in front of me, no matter how ugly it was. I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring out at the empty lot, letting the cold night air seep in through the cracked window. The rage was still there, but now it had a purpose, a direction. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her destroy everything we'd built together. No, I was going to take back control, one way or another. Eventually, I started the car and drove back home. The streets nearly deserted as I navigated through the familiar neighborhood. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, except for the faint glow from the bedroom window. She was still up, probably thinking about how she could spin this in her favor, how she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. I was rewriting the rules. I entered the house quietly, the anger in me now replaced by a cold determination. I walked up the stairs, each step slow and deliberate, until I reached the bedroom door. I didn't knock, I just pushed it open. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. For a moment, she looked up at me, a flicker of hope crossing her face, like she thought maybe I'd calm down, maybe I'd be willing to forgive. But the look in my eyes must have told her otherwise. "I'm staying in the guest room tonight," I said flatly, not giving her a chance to respond. "We'll talk in the morning. And Sarah, I wouldn't try to contact him if I were you. You've done enough damage for one night." She didn't say a word as I turned and walked away, closing the door behind me. But I could feel her eyes on my back, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. She was starting to realize that this wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. As I settled into the guest room, lying on the unfamiliar bed, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now I was the one in control, and I was going to make sure that by the time this was all said and done, Sarah would regret every single choice she had made. The next morning, I woke up early, the tension in my body from the night before still coiled tight. The guest room was silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I lay there for a moment, gathering my thoughts, replaying the events from the previous night. Today was the day everything would start to unravel, and I was ready for it. I could hear faint noises coming from the kitchen. Sarah moving around, probably trying to act like things were normal. But nothing about this was normal anymore. She was walking on thin ice, and I could feel the cracks forming beneath her feet. I got up, took a quick shower, and dressed in silence. As I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. There was a hardness in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a coldness that had taken root overnight. This wasn't the time for second-guessing or for playing the role of the forgiving husband. That man was gone, at least for now. When I walked into the kitchen, Sarah was at the counter, her back to me as she prepared breakfast. The smell of coffee filled the room, but it did nothing to soothe the tension in the air. She must have sensed me behind her because she turned around slowly, a forced smile on her face. "Morning," she said, her voice too light, too casual, as if she was trying to erase everything that had happened last night. "I made coffee. Do you want some?" I ignored the question, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table and sitting down. I could see her falter for a moment, her confidence cracking, but she quickly covered it up, setting the coffee pot down in front of me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cutting through the forced pleasantries. She nodded, biting her lip. "I know. I've been thinking about what you said last night." And I held up a hand, silencing her. "This isn't about what you think you can say to fix this, Sarah. This is about the truth. I'm done with the lies." She stared at me, her face paling slightly. "Matt, don't." I interrupted, my voice firm. "I'm not interested in your excuses. I've already taken steps to find out everything you've been hiding from me. So before you try to spin some sob story, I want you to understand that this is your one chance to come clean. No more lies. No more games. Her eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? What did you do? I talked to Tim, I said, watching as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She knew exactly what that meant. Tim wasn't the kind of person you called for anything trivial. He was the one who could dig deep, uncover things that most people would never find. Matt, please, she stammered, her voice trembling with fear now. You don't need to do this. I'll tell you everything. Just give me a chance to explain. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I'm listening. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she tried to steady herself. It started a few months ago. I was feeling lost, I guess. You were always working late and I felt invisible. I know it sounds stupid, but I started talking to someone online, just as a way to feel seen again. It wasn't supposed to turn into anything more. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. She was trying to play the victim card again, but I wasn't biting. We met a few times, just for coffee at first, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. But then it became more. I'm not proud of it, Matt. I know I screwed up, but I didn't mean for it to get this far. I could feel the anger rising again, but I kept it in check. And you didn't think to stop? You didn't think about the kids? About me? Before you decided to keep sneaking around? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let them sway me. She had already cried enough crocodile tears to fill an ocean. I didn't know how to stop, she admitted, her voice cracking. Every time I tried to end it, he'd pull me back in. He made me feel alive. But I know it was wrong. I know I betrayed you. Alive, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You think that's a good enough reason to destroy everything? Because you wanted to feel alive? She nodded, swallowing hard. I don't expect you to understand, but I'm telling you the truth now. There's nothing more. It's over. I ended it. I stared at her, trying to see if there was any trace of the woman I had married left in those tear-filled eyes. But all I saw was a stranger. Someone who had willingly torn apart our family for her own selfish desires. Good, I finally said, my voice as cold as ice. Because now it's my turn. You're going to pack your things and leave today. The kids will stay with me, and you can explain to them why you won't be around for a while. Matt? No, she gasped, stepping toward me. But I stood up, holding up a hand to stop her. This isn't negotiable, Sarah. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them. I'll talk to my lawyer and we'll figure out the details. But you're not staying in this house. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight back, but she must have seen the resolve in my eyes. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded, defeated. I'll pack my things, she whispered, turning away from me. As she walked out of the kitchen, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a hollow kind of relief. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us, but it was the reality I had to deal with now. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't let her stay. Not after everything she had done as the day wore on. The house fell into a tense, suffocating silence. Sarah was upstairs, packing her things as I had demanded, while I sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television that I hadn't bothered to turn on. The emptiness gnawed at me, but I wasn't about to let it swallow me whole. I needed to stay focused. Just as I was about to go check on the kids at Mrs. Jenkins, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tim. Got something. You're not going to like it. Call me when you're ready. A chill ran down my spine. Tim wasn't one to exaggerate, and if he was saying this, then whatever he had found was worse than I had imagined. I didn't hesitate. I stepped out into the backyard, needing the open air to brace myself for what was coming, and dialed his number. Tim picked up on the first ring. "Matt," he said, his voice low and serious. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I need to know," I replied, gripping the phone tighter. He sighed, and I could almost hear the hesitation on the other end. "All right, it's not just one guy, Matt. She's been seeing more than one. I found records of hotel bookings, messages from different numbers. It's been going on for almost a year. She's been meeting them in different places, using cash, trying to cover her tracks." The world seemed to tilt for a moment, and I had to steady myself against the side of the house. More than one? For almost a year? I had suspected Sarah was lying, but this was a level of betrayal I hadn't even considered. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the anger was bubbling just beneath the surface, threatening to explode. "Some guys from her work, one from a gym she used to go to, and another I couldn't track down yet. She was careful, Matt, but not careful enough. I've got the details, the messages, everything you need if you want to take this further." I swallowed hard, the reality of it all crashing down on me like a tidal wave. "Send it to me," I said, my voice hollow. "I need to see it for myself." "Are you sure? This isn't something you can unsee," Tim warned, his tone softening. He knew what this would do to me. "I'm sure," I replied, even though I could feel my heart breaking with every word. "Send it." "All right, check your email in a few minutes. And Matt, if you need anything, I'm here." I thanked him and hung up, my hands trembling as I pocketed my phone. The backyard, once a place of peace, now felt like a prison. I wanted to scream, to tear down everything around me, but all I could do was stand there, staring at nothing, while my mind raced with the images of what Tim had uncovered. I didn't go back inside immediately. I needed time to process what I just learned, to wrap my head around the fact that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, had been living a double life for so long. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had systematically torn apart our marriage, piece by piece, with every man she let into her life. Eventually, I forced myself to go back inside. The house felt colder now, the walls closing in as the weight of the betrayal settled in my chest. I went straight to my laptop, opening my email with shaking hands. Sure enough, there was Tim's message with several attachments. I clicked on the first file, and my stomach churned as I read through the details. Hotel names, dates, messages that left no room for doubt. Each line was a new dagger to the heart, each photo a fresh wound. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just an affair. It was a series of deliberate betrayals, each one more calculated than the last. The anger returned, hotter than before, burning through the sadness and leaving only a cold resolve in its wake. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She had crossed a line, and now it was my turn to show her what that meant. I closed the laptop, my decision made. She had shattered the illusion of our life together, and now I was going to shatter hers. I went upstairs, each step filled with purpose. The door to the bedroom was open, and Sarah was inside, zipping up the last of her suitcases. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and something else. Fear. Maybe. She knew I had the power now, and she was right to be afraid. "I'm leaving," she said quietly, as if that would make things better, as if her leaving could erase the scars she had carved into our lives. But I wasn't going to let her off that easy. Not after what I'd just seen. Sit down, I said, my voice icy, leaving no room for argument. She hesitated, but something in my expression must have convinced her to comply. She sat down on the edge of the bed, looking up at me with wide eyes. I know everything, Sarah, I began, and I could see her flinch at the coldness in my tone. Not just about last night, but about all of them. I know how long this has been going on, how you tried to hide it. But you weren't careful enough. Her face drained of color as she realized the full extent of what I was saying. Matt, please let me explain. There's nothing you can say that I haven't already heard. I interrupted, my patience with her lies completely gone. You didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed everything we had, over and over again, with every man you brought into your life. You didn't think about me, about the kids. You only thought about yourself. Tears started to spill down her cheeks, but I wasn't moved by them. Not anymore. You're going to leave this house today, and you're not coming back. I've already talked to my lawyer, and you'll be hearing from him soon. As for the kids, I'll make sure they know the truth. Every single detail. Matt, no, she cried, reaching out as if to grab my hand, but I stepped back, out of her reach. Please, don't do this. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this, we can. There is no we anymore, I said, cutting her off. You killed that with every lie, every betrayal. You made your choices, Sarah, and now you'll live with them. Get out. Now. She looked at me, her face crumpling with the realization that there was no way out of this. No more lies, no more manipulations. She had lost, and she knew it. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking as she grabbed her suitcase. She paused at the door, looking back at me one last time, as if hoping for some sign of forgiveness, some chance to fix what she had broken. But I gave her nothing, just a cold, unyielding stare that told her everything she needed to know. She turned and walked out, the sound of the suitcase wheels echoing down the hallway as she left our home, my home, forever. And as the door closed behind her, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. It wasn't over, not yet, but I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life from the ruins she had left behind. There was no going back now, only forward. The silence that followed Sarah's departure was deafening. The house, which had once felt too small, now felt cavernous, echoing with the absence of everything she had taken with her. Her presence, her lies, her deceit. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door she had just walked out of, feeling a strange mixture of relief and devastation. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the reality of it all sink in. She was gone, really gone. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was no longer a part of that life. And it was all her doing. But instead of the crushing sadness I had expected, there was only a numbness, a cold void where my heart used to be. I walked back into the living room, every step heavy with the weight of what had just happened. The coffee she'd made was still sitting on the counter, untouched and growing cold. I dumped it down the sink without a second thought, watching the dark liquid swirl away, just like our marriage had. My phone buzzed again, breaking the stillness. It was Mrs. Jenkins, checking in about the kids. I hesitated for a moment before picking up, trying to shake off the fog of the morning's events. "Hey, Mrs. Jenkins," I said, my voice rough from the strain of everything. "How are they doing?" "They're fine, Matt," she replied, her voice warm and reassuring. "They've been playing all morning. They don't know anything is wrong, don't worry. Are you okay?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before answering. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just handling things. You don't have to do this alone, you know," she said gently. "If you need anything at all, just let me know." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her kindness. "I'll come pick them up soon." "Take your time," she insisted. "They're happy here, and you should take a moment for yourself." After I hung up, I sat down on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, none of them settling long enough for me to grasp. The house, usually filled with the sounds of the kids, felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of what once was. It was too much. I needed to get out of here to clear my head. I grabbed my jacket and keys, locking the door behind me as I stepped out into the cool afternoon air. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to drive, to put some distance between myself and the wreckage of my life. The streets were busy with the usual weekend traffic, families going about their day, couples strolling hand in hand. It was all so normal, so ordinary, and yet it felt like I was watching it from a distance, as if I no longer belonged to that world. My car seemed to steer itself toward the park, a place I hadn't been in months. It was where we used to take the kids when they were younger, where Sarah and I had once laughed together, before everything went so terribly wrong. The memories flooded back as I parked the car and got out, walking along the familiar paths. The park was alive with activity. Kids playing, people walking their dogs, the sound of laughter and life. But I felt disconnected from it all, like a ghost passing through someone else's memories. I found a bench near the lake, sitting down and staring out at the water, the gentle ripples reflecting the late afternoon sun. What now? That was the question that kept echoing in my mind. What was I supposed to do now that everything I had believed in was gone? The anger, the resolve I had felt earlier, was fading, replaced by a hollow sadness that I couldn't shake. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but the path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. As I sat there, watching the ducks glide across the water, I realized something. I was alone, truly alone. For the first time in years, there was no one to share my thoughts with, no one to turn to. Sarah was gone, and the life we had built together was nothing but ashes. I had friends, sure, but this was different. This was the kind of loneliness that came from realizing that the person who was supposed to be your partner, your confidant, had betrayed you in the worst possible way. But with that realization came something else, something I hadn't expected. Freedom. It was a cold, bitter kind of freedom, but it was there nonetheless. I was no longer tied down by her lies, no longer bound to a relationship that had been rotting from the inside out. I could rebuild. I could start over. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but it was possible. I stood up, taking one last look at the lake before turning back toward the parking lot. The road ahead was going to be hard, and I knew there would be days when the weight of it all would feel too heavy to bear. But I also knew that I couldn't let her win. She had taken enough from me already. My trust, my love, my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let her take my future too. As I drove back to Mrs. Jenkins to pick up the kids, a sense of purpose began to form in the back of my mind. I would focus on them, on being the father they needed me to be. They were innocent in all of this, and I wasn't going to let my anger or sadness ruin their lives. I would rebuild not just for myself, but for them. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to heal. The drive back to Mrs. Jenkins felt longer than usual, each turn of the wheel bringing me closer to a conversation I wasn't ready to have. The kids were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they deserved some explanation. My thoughts were a tangled mess as I tried to figure out how to tell them that their mother wouldn't be coming home tonight, or maybe ever again. I pulled into Mrs. Jenkins' driveway, taking a moment to steady myself before getting out of the car. The sound of laughter drifted through the open windows of her house, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile onto my face as I knocked on the door. Mrs. Jenkins opened it almost immediately, her warm, motherly presence a small comfort in the midst of everything. "Come in, Matt," she said, stepping aside to let me in. There in the living room, playing with the dog. I nodded, my smile faltering as I stepped inside. The kids were on the floor, building some kind of elaborate fort out of pillows and blankets, while Mrs. Jenkins' old golden retriever watched with mild interest. Seeing them like that, so happy, so carefree, made the knot in my stomach tighten. "Hey, kiddos," I said, trying to keep my voice light as I walked into the room. They both looked up, grinning when they saw me. "Dad!" Jake, my oldest, jumped up and ran over, hugging me tightly around the waist. "Can we stay here for dinner?" Mrs. Jenkins said we could have pizza. I forced myself to laugh, ruffling his hair. "We'll see, buddy, but first we need to head home. We can talk about dinner on the way. Okay?" Emily, my youngest, looked up from her fort with wide, curious eyes. "Where's Mommy?" she asked, her voice innocent and trusting, like she was just asking what time it was. I hesitated, my heart twisting at the question. "She's not coming home right now," I said carefully, crouching down to be on their level. "She had to go away for a little while." Both of them frowned, clearly confused. "Where did she go?" Jake asked, his grip on my hand tightening. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Mommy needed some time to herself," I said slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "She's going to stay somewhere else for a while, but you guys are going to stay with me, okay? We're going to get through this together." Emily's eyes welled up with tears, and she crawled out from under her fort, coming over to hug me. "I don't want Mommy to go away," she whispered, her small arms wrapping around my neck. "I know, sweetheart," I murmured, holding her close. "I know it's hard, but we're going to be okay. I promise." Jake's frown deepened, his young mind trying to process what I was saying. "Is it because you and Mommy had a fight?" he asked, his voice tinged with fear. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Yeah, Jake, we had a fight, but that doesn't change how much we both love you. Okay? Your mom and I are just trying to figure some things out right now." Mrs. Jenkins hovered in the doorway, her eyes filled with sympathy as she watched us. "You're welcome to stay for a bit if you need more time, Matt," she offered gently, but I shook my head. "Thanks, but I think we should go home. I need to talk to them some more." She nodded, understanding in her gaze. "You know where to find me if you need anything." I managed a grateful smile, then gently untangled myself from Emily's embrace and helped the kids gather their things. The ride home was quiet, the weight of what I had told them hanging in the air like a storm cloud. They didn't ask any more questions, and for that I was thankful. I wasn't sure I had any more answers to give. When we got home, the house felt colder than it had before. The absence of Sarah was glaringly obvious now, her usual presence replaced by a void that seemed to swallow everything in its path. I guided the kids inside, trying to keep up the appearance of normalcy, even as I felt it slipping through my fingers. "Why don't you guys go play in your rooms for a bit?" I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll make us some dinner soon." They nodded, their faces still etched with confusion and worry. But they did as I asked, disappearing down the hallway. I watched them go, the reality of what I had just done hitting me all over again. How do you explain to a child that their mother won't be coming home? How do you make them understand something you barely understand yourself? I leaned against the kitchen counter, closing my eyes and rubbing my temples. The numbness was wearing off, and in its place was a gnawing sense of loss, of failure. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. We were supposed to be a family. We were supposed to be happy. But now it was just me and the kids trying to piece together what was left. I opened the fridge, searching for something to distract myself, to focus on anything other than the gaping hole in our lives. I started pulling out ingredients, my hands moving on autopilot as I began to prepare dinner. The routine helped, giving me something to cling to, something to keep me grounded. As I cooked, I could hear the kids talking quietly in their rooms, their voices soft and uncertain. I knew they were scared, confused, maybe even angry, and I knew it was up to me to hold it all together, to be the anchor they needed in this storm. But as I stirred the pot on the stove, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control, that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix what had been broken. I couldn't take back Sarah's betrayal, couldn't erase the damage she had done. All I could do was move forward one step at a time and hope that somehow, someway we would find our way through this. The sound of footsteps behind me pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Jake standing in the doorway, his face serious. "Dad," he said quietly, "is Mommy ever coming back?" I stared at him, my heart breaking at the question. "I don't know, Jake," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. I promise." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. I tried to give him a smile, tried to be the strong, dependable father he needed. But the truth was, I was just as lost as he was.